Radio702. Talk at 9. SMS Gushwell on 31702.
26 minutes to go before we get to 11 o'clock. And my goodness, she came to studio. Good evening. How are you doing?
Good evening. Good. I'm well. I'm very happy to be here and great to be in studio with you, finally.
Because we've chatted on air quite a couple of times. I mean, back in the Lead SA days when you were still here with us at Lead SA, and then when I did Talk at 9, I think.
Yes,
it was
that's
Talk at 9.
correct, yes.
So I'd stand in on Talk at 9 occasionally. And we do the Lead SA roundup, and guess who's on the line? Catherine CONSTANTINIDES, right? But that also reminds me of the first time we chatted on air. Do you remember what happened?
Oh, goodness. Remind me.
I stuffed up your surname so badly.
I wanted to actually say I'm really impressed that you've got my surname down to a T.
No, because I promised myself after that fact that I would never, ever, ever get it. Either I'd never say your surname again.
You just say Catherine.
or I'll go work. And the sad thing for me is I actually practiced. I practiced and practiced and practiced.
I'm really impressed.
And the moment your name appeared and I clicked on it and I had to say, good evening, Catherine CONSTANTINIDES. And I just messed it up. But how have you been?
I'm good. I can't believe we're already halfway through the month of April. I don't know where this year has gone.
I was actually worried when you said halfway through. I thought you were going to say halfway through the year, and I was going to be like,
"Oh,
what?"
It's nearly there. It's nearly there.
No. It's I definitely feel it because it feels like I'm aging at an exponential rate at the moment. But let's kick things off. I mean, Catherine, you have had an illustrious career, and I know you're going to get all humble and no, it's not. And you've had an awesome career. I mean, I remember when I came to Lead SA the first time. I can't remember even exactly what it was about, but we had a meeting, right?
Yes.
I think that's the first time that we actually met each other in person.
Yes, that's right.
So, which floor were you on? Third floor?
Yes.
Just above us, right?
Yeah.
I came up here and all nervous and stuff because I have to speak to the great Lead SA about ABCD idea. And you were very receptive and you said, let's go with it, right? But before that, you had a whole career before that as well.
Correct.
Where does it start for you?
I think a lot of the work that I've done has really always been about how do we build South Africa? How do we do things that really add value to the communities where we are? Because I think so often people get stuck with wanting to have a position, a title to do something. And what we forget is that it is so easy for each and every one of us to really, really play our part in building our nation from where we are. And it really starts at the community level from where you live. And I think that it was an ethos and a value system that I grew up with from home. We used to spend our weekends going and playing bingo with old people at old age homes and community centres in Orange Farm, in Soweto, very close to where I lived. We were brought up in a very humble home, but one that was really about service. And so my life was really framed around you live a life of service and you serve those around you, and your focus is how do you add value to where you are. And so that kind of mindset really perpetuated a beautiful journey, actually, and an organic journey to really focus on community development from a very young age. My sister and I used to do so many community projects after school that at one point people thought that we were not at school because we were doing so much outside of that school. And it was a really special way to really find our feet, to fall, to fail and get up so quickly again, because I think we were so young and we didn't know what mistakes were, and I think it was easy for us to get up, pick up and carry on. And so I started a social enterprise at the age of 16 to specifically focus on how could I really raise funds to do more work.
Wow.
And it started all there.
Well, I don't even want to be telling. Look, I was a geek, so I wasn't doing anything particularly exciting at the age of 16. But I mean, I think that there's very few 16-year-olds out there that can actually go back and say that, listen, I actually went and I really became part and parcel of this massive social movement, whether I started off small or not. The issue is that very few people are in that particular position. But I mean, what drives you in that space? And I know it's a very difficult question to answer generally, because all too often what tends to happen when it comes to social enterprise, because I've been working in a similar space on the periphery. So I've worked with many NGOs, I work for Chapter 9 at the moment. So obviously it is always about either human rights or migrant rights or gender, all of these things that need equality, some level of equality in South Africa, right? So what tends to then happen is that it sometimes becomes about the individual. So you have those people that it's actually about them.
Sure.
It's not about the starving kids. It's not about the whatever. That Facebook post, that Twitter post or Instagram, whatever, has to have them in it. It's not about what the situation is and what they're trying to achieve. On the other hand, you also have people that sort of enter the scene, gung-ho, excited. They want to work with people. They want to change the world. And then you become either disenchanted or, you realize that the world is actually tougher than what you imagined it to be. I mean, we'll get to some of the specific examples that you're working with, but the world is actually a sick place, right?
Sure.
And a lot of people then give up in that space. So what keeps you going?
I think all of the things that you've said are really important, and they're very important because I think people don't understand their why. It doesn't even matter, not even just in the social enterprise space. People actually don't understand why they do what they do. So they make decisions based on, right now, okay, well, let me just do this or let me do that. And they get lost in their own daily lives as to what they're doing, and they don't remember why they started and why it is that they've got into a space. For me, I've worked on the ground at a very grassroots community level since I was very, very young. And being able to be on the ground in communities and to actually understand the grievances of communities, to understand what the real challenges are and what it actually looks like. On social media, there was no social media at the time, but now social media can portray a specific, you can actually specifically curate what something looks like because of social media. But for me, having seen people who have literally died of AIDS, being somebody who has worked in communities where the communities no longer exist because of the impact of climate change, because people have had to flee because there's no access to safe, clean drinking water.
Yeah.
These are the realities of the things that I've seen with my own eyes, and I've worked and engaged. And it's really about that real, authentic connection with human beings who really require you to give of your time and to give of who you are to what their situation is. And I think being on radio, you will understand sometimes some people just need to be able to speak. They need a space and a safe space where they can actually just talk about what is frustrating them, what is hurting them, what is paining them. And having those kinds of conversations at a very informative age has really shaped the kind of work that I've done. And I feel an immense responsibility that in everything that I do, I must be a part of building our great nation. I'm a child who is born into a country that has a very dark history and a very painful history. But what am I going to do by virtue of having been born in a country at this time? What do I do with the place I find myself in to build our nation and to heal the pains of the past that still are so alive within every kind of space that we find ourselves in?
Sure. Look, Catherine, I mean, I think part of the other problem is, and I mean, it's interesting that you made the point in something I fundamentally believe in, is that a lot of people don't know why they're in it,
Yes.
So it's easy to, and that's what I always say, that there's just two types of people in the world. And I'm not saying that you're a careerist, but I'm just bringing it back to the notion of the career. Some people have a career. So in other words, this is what I'm doing. This is what I'm meant to do. I'm going to earn money doing something that I can tolerate or love or whatever, right? So I haven't even figured it out for myself yet, but I'm going to do something that I really do enjoy. And earn money through that, etc. Because inevitably you have children to raise, you have electricity bills to pay when Eskom switches on the lights, you have water to pay, you have groceries to go buy, etc., etc., etc. So it's easier then to sort of say that, listen, I'm going to stick myself in a call center or factory or, in my little business rather than working for the service of others. Now, of course, we know that there are jobs, as in jobs, and, you can build a career on this in being that career do-gooder. So, but it's not necessarily, it's not for everyone. Not everyone's cut the local core. What is your advice then to some young person listening to you now, I don't know, at the end of the matric, at the end of the university, sitting there and saying that, listen, I want to do something for the world, but this thing called cash, this thing called money and income, and being able to chat with the friends of the braai and say, I'm doing something respectable.
I think it's important that people understand that the kind of work that I do and, the specifics of the work I do is very difficult. And you don't necessarily I have not yet found where I can make money doing that work. So you land up doing a lot of other things in order to be able to support that which is your calling, that which you're passionate about. Not everyone can be in a job in a space where they every single day love what they do. And unfortunately, it's just the way of the world. Some people go to work and it's 8 to 5 and they pay their bills at the end of the month. They know they're going to get a salary. But for someone listening and they've studied something, but that's not exactly what they want to go into, or they know they want to do more, but they're not yet sure what it is. Find something that is going to be able to allow you to pay your bills and is going to give you the space and flexibility to understand for yourself what it is that you want to do that will allow you to be of service, to be of greater value within that space that you're passionate about. But find something for now that will allow you to pay bills. Do something with your time in your life. Don't go and sit and do nothing until you've worked out what it is that you want to do. Because the worst thing that we can do is have people who have finished school, matric, university, and are sitting back because they're actually not sure what they want to do, so they sit at home and do nothing. Get into doing something, learn about the world out there, get experience, get into the workplace. It's important that people make sure that they find themselves in a job, and from there you can navigate where else you want to go and how you want to grow yourself in the space of a different avenue or something else that really talks to your calling or your passion.
I think also part of it is sort of the safety of knowing where you're going to go. So if I go to university and I study law, bad example because sort of my trajectory. So you study law, you go do articles afterwards, you become either an attorney or an advocate, right? So that's generally the trajectory that everyone envisions. It's a
mapped out path almost.
It's a mapped out path. It's, that's where this is where you start, that's where you're going to end. I mean, what you did, I'm pretty sure that there was no articles, attorney, advocate, judge.
Well, let me tell you something interesting in that
I'm
space.
sure it was a very interesting route that you took there.
It was an interesting route, but I think for many other reasons. So I started out, I was very passionate about community development, did that from a very young age, started a social enterprise, finished matric. The goal was always to study law and anthropology. Law I was very passionate about. At the time, I couldn't afford to study because I had a very sick father and a mom who was looking after him, and we could not actually afford for me to go to university. I applied for a bursary. I got the bursary. I went to Wits University. In the second year, my bursary was taken away because I was not black and I was not male. I applied for 7 other bursaries. They were all denied on the same principle.
Wow.
Even though I came from a home where we could not afford for me to go to university. And so I was determined to make sure.
So someone else would have been, quite frankly, pissed off and would have said, that stuff the system, I'm off to Australia.
Absolutely. And I think the
You
important
would have had
thing
a horrible
for me,
Australian accent, though.
I hate the Australian.
No, I'm sorry. You do know I wouldn't have spoken to you if you had an Australian
We wouldn't
accent.
have this conversation, absolutely. But I realized that at a very young age that I have to carry a burden for a past that I was not a part of. And that was a very painful, very hard thing to do. But I realized that with what had happened, and it took me a long time to get past the pain and the anger and the frustration of where I find myself. But I realized that I was going to still do everything I wanted to do to add value, to give back to communities, to continue the work that I was doing. And so I continued working within the social enterprise I had started, which I'd kind of at that point put on a back burner. I made sure that I was going to find a way that my siblings could go to university and could study anything that they wanted and not have to rely on a system that now was, frustrating and was going to pain sort of my journey. And the one thing that I learned at a young age was wherever you find yourself, absorb information, take away the wisdom of others, learn from people around you. And for me, life has really been my university, and I've had very hard lessons that I've learned, but I really think that I've been on a path where if I'd been at university and I'd finished that degree, I think my journey would have been very different.
Yeah, and probably you would have been that lawyer I don't want to talk to as well.
Exactly.
No, but I mean, what I find fascinating about your story as well for me is that, of course, there is, at the moment, a lot of the work that you're doing is for others, on behalf of others. So it's a lot of you giving of yourself. But it seems that a lot of your journey was that, because all too often when we think about the type of work that we're doing, that you're doing, the first word that we think of is philanthropy, right?
Sure.
And especially for you, I mean, you know, and I don't want to have people think the wrong thing, but you know, you have that look of you could be either the billionaire, right, the celebrity billionaire that's going out there and you speaking on behalf of the Sahara and so on and so forth. You could be hanging out with George Clooney and Angelina Jolie, in other words, right?
Thanks.
But the ultimate thought is that you come from money and you moneyed up, and you know, you have all these riches, you have billions stashed away somewhere, and now you're just spending it all, you know, trying to give your little bit back, your 1% back to society. But that's not the case. You actually came from the tough journey, and despite the tough journey, instead of saying that, listen, it's about me and I'm going to be the ultimate capitalist, you're actually out there doing for others.
You know, I think it's important that people start to, for themselves, realize that you do the greatest disservice to yourself when you box somebody before you've even allowed them an opportunity to speak. So yes, I know that I'll walk into a room and people have judged me before I've even opened my mouth. But I welcome people, you know, really creating their own perception, because I will do whatever I need to make sure that you will leave that room and you will have a very different perception. I think that people far too often will judge a book by its cover just because of the way that we speak, our race, and by the assumptions that are linked to those two things. And so just by virtue of the fact that my skin happens to be white, you would assume that I went to a private school, that I came from a northern suburb somewhere in Johannesburg or Cape Town, etc. But those things are not true. I went to a government school. I battled through school because, you know, money was always an issue. I grew up in a very humble home, and I understood my friends were, you know, I am so immersed in what the real South Africa looks like because of the kind of upbringing I had. I could not be more grateful for that. And I think that people are so quick to judge, and we really have to try and change that mindset.
I mean, it's an interesting conversation in itself. I mean, what we're discussing now, the notion of, because I can imagine if you wanted to, we'll get to it in more specific detail now, but I mean, you work with the Sahara people very closely, you know, in Western Sahara, in the middle of the desert, in what is ultimately a refugee camp.
Yes.
Those aren't the nicest of circumstances. I've worked in refugee camps myself. I'm sort of familiar, you know, with the conditions that you find there. No running water, no electricity, unless people have solar power, etc., etc. All of those, I'm sure that's what you come across. Where if you're in the camp, you eat in the camp.
Yes.
So that goat that was running around earlier this morning is probably, you know, what you're going to be served for lunch, and you have to adapt to that. If you need the loo, you have to use the pit latrine as well, like everyone else. So all too often, I'm pretty sure that you're told that, oh no, Catherine, that's too difficult, too hard for you, too harsh for you.
I love it when, you know, somebody actually said to me yesterday, sure, you clean up well, because I'd gone to a wedding, and I actually take that as a huge compliment, because often I'll either be in gumboots or I am in a refugee camp, or I'm doing something, you know, really on the ground. But you'll go to Instagram and you'll see a picture of me and you will just assume 10,000 things just from that one picture. But if you scroll down, you'll see I live with the Sahrawi refugees, and I live in the refugee camp with them. And it is a matter of when I'm there, you can't have a shower because there is no shower. I recently did the Sahara Marathon, and I did it to raise awareness of victims of landmines and the Sahrawi freedom fighters who find themselves fighting for their freedom and their basic human rights. So I did it to raise this cause, to raise awareness around this cause. When I was finished that marathon, I'm not an athlete, firstly. So trying to race and to actually prep for this race was a mind game on its own. Yeah. But as you finish the race, the only thing you could possibly think that you really want to do is to have a shower. And it's the one thing you can't do. There is no running water. I did get a bit of an extra big bucket of water that day to bath with, or to rinse with, which I was very grateful. But there are no toilets, there are no baths. There is no sanitation facility whatsoever. Yeah. I live in a tent, sometimes with 12 other people, in a refugee camp where I'm sure they can see me from the moon because I look different, I speak differently, I am so different in so many ways. And I think the magic of the work that I get to do with the Sahrawi people and the work in the refugee camps is the fact that they have taken me as one of their own. I don't see myself as different to them. If today all we can eat is couscous, that's all we're going to eat. If they are eating food from 4 days ago, then that's what we're going to eat. These are people that still rely on food aid, and they still rely on their water to be trucked in every few weeks. The conditions are inhumane, and the humanitarian crisis that exists is unbelievable. These refugees have been in these refugee camps for 43 years, a refugee camp that was set up as a temporary camp. And the work that I do there is by no means easy, but it is important work because the platforms I have, I can highlight, and I talk on behalf of the people that have given me a responsibility to share their story with the world.
Now, in awareness raising, and this is something that I also find very interesting, all too often when you're raising awareness around nutrition, around political rights, civil rights, socioeconomic rights, whatever it might be. In your instance about the Sahrawi people in Western Sahara, I mean, I remember that the last time, and I think I intimated this to you, the first time I ever heard of the people of the Western Sahara was when I was in high school doing model UN debates.
Yes.
And ever since then, I've never noticed anything in the news bulletin. I can't think of an article, a news bulletin, or anything that sort of brought it to light since. And it's been a hell of a long time. It's been nearly 2 decades since I've been out of school, right? I've never seen anything that particularly jumped out and said, the people of Western Sahara. Doesn't it frustrate you, or the sort of the noticeable ignorance around such an important issue?
Absolutely. But the reason is that there's no political will to change the situation. And because there has been no political will globally, you have an ally. Morocco's ally is France. And for those that are listening that perhaps don't know, Western Sahara is occupied illegally by Morocco and has been for 43 years. And this illegal occupation has now extended to a colonization. And this is a colonization of one African country on another. And 2 years ago, we allowed Morocco back into the African Union without terms and conditions. And this, for me, was a fundamental flaw in what is meant to be a system that is there to serve us as a continent. And we can really, that's another conversation where we can actually say, well, if we look at the funding model of the African Union, you can see that there are outside influences into what happens and what gets attention when it comes to the African Union. But the failure of Africa, South Africa specifically as a country, but the globe as a whole, to give attention to a cause that has really, really been covered by a black curtain for 43 years is unbelievable. We live in a year where in 2019 we have more access to information than we ever had before, and yet there is an entire nation of people who are still in a situation where they're fighting for a self-determination and a referendum that was promised to them 28 years ago when they put down their arms and there was a ceasefire, and yet we have still not brought the correct attention and urgency to the situation.
So, on that, there's obviously someone listening right now, and they have the itch, and you probably know what I'm talking about. You have that itch, you have the burning desire, you want to do something, you're not too sure exactly what. And all too often I find that these things, the path sort of figures itself out. You find yourself in the right place at the right time, and you make your intervention, for lack of a better term, and you do that thing that's right by you, and you know that you're doing it on behalf of others, or in assisting others. The key question then for me is, Catherine, from your perspective, any young person listening to us now having this conversation, what do they take out of this? How do they then go back and say that, Mom, Dad, listen, guys, thanks for the engineering degree. Thanks for, being an actuary one day, or an accountant, or whatever the case is. But I actually want to make a difference as well. How do they go about that particular path? And how do they find themselves, inverted commas?
Look, firstly, that's going to be a hard conversation, and good luck to you. Let us know how that goes. But like I said before, ask yourself, what is the why? Why do you want to do something, and what is it that you want to do? Find out what that is, because that's very important before you even have a conversation with another person. For yourself, you need to understand what that is. The other thing is that people need to understand there are simple things that we can do in our daily lives. If you've got a very basic job and you've got a basic salary, the comfort of an income on a monthly basis, but you want to do more, you're not sure what that is. I ask people to just look at where they are, become more of an active citizen. Once you start to shift that mindset of what can I do today that's going to add value to our country? It's as simple as the guy who you drive past every single day at the robot up the road. Do you know his name? Do you know where he lives? Have you had a conversation with him, or do you just sort of put your hand up and look the other way when he comes past your car? Have those conversations. Or even maybe
give him the 2 rand and the 5 rand.
Or
but
you
still
might
look
even
the
give
other
it. Absolutely. And the other, where we live, so easy to moan and complain about a light that's off or running water. How many of us know the name of our councillor in the ward which we live? How many of us have their numbers on our phone and actually go through the right system to report a broken light or running water? Instead, we're armchair critics. We sit at home, we'll tweet a picture and just complain about these kinds of things. So I'd like to urge everyone, it doesn't matter if you want to become more of a humanitarian and more of an activist. Be an activist where you are. Start with the small things. Start to be engaged from where you're sitting, because I think that our country needs to change from the ground up. And it really is about how do we build a nation from the community up. And it means that you as an individual must start to take responsibility. Don't go and step into a big arena you're not sure of. Try and fix where you are and try to be a little bit more engaged with the space that you occupy on a daily basis.
On that, I can't best that. Thank you so much, Catherine.